Vikings, Saxon warriors, buxom wenches, and ale. What's not to love? Welcome to the Tainted Tavern.
Welcome to the Tainted Tavern. Come sit inside for free.
You know, back last week I was out shopping, and whenever I go shopping I tend to pop into second-hand shops and charity shops, and I came across this first edition copy of The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. There's a sticker there that I'm struggling to get off, which is put on a charity shop, but I will get that off. I just haven't got round to it yet. A warm soapy sponge, and I'll get that off, but the book's in really good condition, and as I say, it is a first edition. Also a nice little surprise when I opened the book up. In fact, it looks to be unread, but when I opened the book up I found a couple of stamps which have been unused, Star Trek stamps, two of the captains. So I'm going to come closer to the camera with these. I've got a Jean-Luc Picard one there, and the Captain Kirk there. So these are a nice surprise finding these inside the book. But I've read this book before, The Last Kingdom. There are 13 books in this series, plus an extra book which I can describe as an Uhtred cookbook. Though it's not really that, or it does give Anglo-Saxon recipes, but it looks a lot at the world, the Dark Ages world that the Last Kingdom or the Saxon Chronicles series was set in. I have read this before. I've probably read 3 or 4 books in the series. I've always intended to get through the whole series because I very much enjoy them, but I never had. That's just the way it's going to go, but I think I'm going to remedy that now, and I am going to go through the whole series. So I thought I'd start by rereading this book, The Last Kingdom. I didn't read the hardcover. I've already had it on my Kindle, on my Coloursoft, so I read it on the Kindle Coloursoft, and I highlighted a few passages as I went through the book, because I knew I wanted to do a review of this. In fact, I'm going to review over the next, maybe, let's set a target of 18 months. I'm going to review the entire Last Kingdom series. So that's all 13 books, and we'll also look at Uhtred's Good Housekeeping Guide for the last video, maybe. So I highlighted a few passages here because I want to give the feeling of what these books are. Now, The Last Kingdom starts off with Uhtred, the main character who drives the whole series. Now, it's the story of Alfred the Great and the founding of England, how England came to be. But it's told through the eyes of Uhtred, who is largely a fictional character, although he is based on a real character that did live in Bebbanburg, which is where Uhtred is an ealdorman or a lord of, during a later period of history. So there's some basis on that, but Uhtred is by and large a fictional character. Now I've highlighted a section in this, the first book, The Last Kingdom, just to give you a feeling of the way the story is told. Now this, of course, comes from Uhtred's own words, because when we first meet Uhtred, he's an illiterate young boy. He learns to read much later, and the reason he learns to read, he fights that. He doesn't want to be a scholar. Uhtred wants to be a warrior. He wants to hear the sword song as he swings his sword at foes. But he learns to read in order to take control of a fleet of ships to challenge the Vikings. And Alfred will not allow him to take control of these ships unless he can read. His rationale for this is that Uhtred will need to take orders. He will need to be given orders, written orders, so if he can't read, he can't command the ships. Uhtred, for his part, is reluctant to learn to read because he feels that the only reason that they want him to read is so he can read the holy books, so he can become as pious and sanctimonious as King Alfred himself, or Boecker, who is the monk who befriends Uhtred and carries through a lot of the series. So I'm just going to read this little section here, and these are Uhtred's words, of course. Uhtred is telling his story as an old man, so we know right from the get-go that Uhtred has survived and he's lived to his old age. He's telling his story as an old man. It was really effective, though, I feel, for the author, Bernard Cornwell, to tell this in a first-person narrative. It brings the reader, I feel, closer to the action, closer to what is happening, because we're actually inside Uhtred's head for the story. So, before I carry on, let's read this. The poets, when they speak of war, talk of the shield wall. They talk of the spears and arrows flying, of the blade beating on the shield, of the heroes who fall and the spoils of the victors. But I was to discover that war was really about food, about feeding men and horses, about finding food, the army that eats wins. And if you keep horses in a fortress, it is about shoveling dung. Just 2 days after the land army came to Redingham, we were short of food, and the two Sidrooks, fathers and son, led a large force west into enemy territory to find stores for food, for men and horses, and instead they found the Fide of Berustica. Cornwell's writing, it's very much boy's own type adventure, but there's a lot of historical detail woven into this story, so he doesn't bog the reader down as if the reader's getting an history lesson. He's first and foremost a storyteller. So the story, the momentum, the way he carries the story forward is paramount. Although the historical detail that he brings into these stories it's excellent. There's an old saying, "Stop, your slip is showing," relating to writing, and what that means basically is any book, no matter what the genre, needs a lot of research. Any novel needs a lot of research, but that research, that the writer has done that research, mustn't be evident in the story. The writer mustn't beat the reader with that research. It's got to become a part of the story, so it feels real, so it gives the story itself a reality. Because let's face it, I mean, you're sitting in your chair, you've got your book open and you're reading words. That's words on paper. You're sitting in 2026 reading this book, and yet the skill of the storyteller, the words bring you back to this period. It's a fantastic method that Cornwell has mastered of telling a story. So yes, there is a lot of research, a lot of heavy research, but that research is not evident. And when the reader steps into the world Cornwell presents it to the reader, it's real, it's actually happening, and the reader's there, the reader's within Uhtred's mindset. The reader is witnessing it almost firsthand. That's the skill of Bernard Cornwell. I've read a lot of Cornwell's books over the years. Interestingly enough, not his most well-known books. I've read one or two of the Sharp novels, and I think I've read 4 or 5 of these Last Kingdom, the Saxon Chronicles series. But I've read The Winter King, the trilogy there of King Arthur. I read Stonehenge. I really enjoyed Stonehenge. That's an imagination of how Stonehenge was built. That was a great book. So I've read a lot of his stuff, and I do really enjoy him as an author. So let's go back to the Last Kingdom. Now this story, as I say, it starts off Uhtred as a young boy. The Vikings have landed, or the Danes have landed, of course, because Viking is a word that doesn't have a racial connotation. These people weren't Vikings as such, these Danes, they weren't Vikings. Viking was an occupation. And that's explained within the narrative of this story, or rather it's not explained, but it's presented through the way that the characters, Uhtred and the secondary characters, view the Danes. Now, Uhtred is taken prisoner by the Danes very early on in the book as a young boy, and he's brought up by the Danes, by Ragnar Lothbrok, and Uhtred comes to love Ragnar, and that love is reciprocated because Ragnar becomes to treat Uhtred as a son, and so Uhtred gets formed, becomes a man while with the Danes, and when they end up going back to attack England again, Uhtred fights alongside the Danes in order to subdue the Saxons, but Uhtred soon comes to the attention of King Alfred, and Uhtred ends up, especially after, I don't want to give too many spoilers away here, but there was a successful TV series made based on this series of books, so it'll be no secret to say that Ragnar gets killed. Uhtred then ends up back with the Saxons, fighting alongside the Saxons, and in fact leading a Saxon army. All that is in this first book, titled The Last Kingdom, and The Last Kingdom, due to the TV series rather, has become an overall title for the entire series, even though I think the books were originally, when they first came out, known as the Saxon Chronicles. But they're just wonderful action-adventure books, you know, and the history that you're learning when you're reading these books, you're almost learning without being aware of it, because you're just so sucked into the story, so much enjoying the story, that the history, it just sinks in without you realizing it. The book is not academic in any way. It's a rip-roaring adventure. I very much enjoyed The Last Kingdom. I know the second book in the series now is The Pale Horseman, which is another that I've already read. As I said, I think I've read the first 4 in the series, but I'm going to reread The Pale Horseman now, because I want to go through all of these books and give reviews. But to sum up the review of The Last Kingdom, I know the first book in the series, I know I've been talking about the series as an overall arc, but so let's just look at this first book. Now, as I say, it starts off with Uhtred as a young boy. A big element of this story is the shield wall, and there's much told about the shield wall throughout the story. Right at the beginning of the book, Uhtred sees his own father fighting in a shield wall. His father is killed. Later on in the book, Uhtred as a young boy, he's not allowed to take part in the shield walls because he's still considered too young and so too puny by Ragnar. But he watches other men fighting in the shield wall, and the shield wall almost becomes a psychological hurdle that Uhtred knows he must cross, and one day he has to fight in his first shield wall. And the book leads up until Uhtred does fight in his first shield wall, and it ends there after that battle. It's really brilliantly put together, and the shield wall becomes, as I say, a psychological barrier throughout the book that Uhtred has to cross, because no matter what he does, he won't become a warrior, in his own opinion, a full-blown warrior until he fights in that shield wall. There is a section in the book earlier on where he does fight in a shield wall of sorts, when he fights against a group of Britain's Welsh characters. How dare you attack the Welsh? But he fights against a group of Welsh characters, and that's sort of a shield wall, but it's a very small shield wall. It's not a full-blown shield wall. So that's his first experience of shield wall. But later on, towards the end of this book, when we've got this big battle between Uhtred, now with the Saxons, and the Vikings led by Uber, it's a fantastic final scene, and that's the thing that Cornwell does well in all the battles. I mean, the chaos of the battles, where you've got, swords swinging, axes swinging, spears being thrown, shields banging against shields. The chaos of that battle, Cornwell gets that on the page so well. You can really picture it in your mind when you're reading it. So if you haven't read any of the Last Kingdom books, and you think you'd be interested in historical adventure fiction with a firm grounding in history, in accepted fact, then I would highly recommend these books. So that's The Last Kingdom, book 1 in the series. We'll continue these series of reviews with the second book, The Pale Horseman, within a few weeks, because, well, I've got to read the bloody thing again first. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this quick review of The Last Kingdom, so give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment below. Have you read The Last Kingdom? What did you think? And also, if you haven't done so already, then please subscribe to the channel. So thanks for coming to the Tainted Tavern, and please come back soon.
come back soon.